The heavy silence inside Buckingham Palace that evening was almost suffocating. Behind the ornate golden doors and century-old portraits of kings and queens past, something unimaginable was unfolding, a secret so explosive that it threatened to rip apart the very fabric of the British monarchy. For decades, the royal family has projected an image of tradition, stability, and continuity, but now whispers of betrayal and hidden truths began to seep out like poison into the public consciousness. What if the child so proudly presented to the world as a royal heir, the young boy who was supposed to carry forward the bloodline of kings, wasn't who they claimed he was? What if the lineage itself had been tainted by deception? This wasn't a question the royals were prepared to answer, and yet, one man decided the truth could no longer remain buried. A respected doctor, once entrusted with guarding the most intimate secrets of Britain's most famous family, had broken his silence. His revelation wasn't just scandalous, it was catastrophic. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. According to this whistleblower, a secret paternity test conducted years ago confirmed that Prince Harry is not the biological father of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor. The test, allegedly ordered in hushed tones by a senior royal aide, was meant to be quietly sealed away forever. But the doctor claimed that Meghan Markle, Harry's wife and Archie's mother, moved heaven and earth to suppress it, fighting behind palace walls to protect a lie that could destroy her family's royal future. And now, in a shocking move that has shaken the monarchy to its core, King Charles III has reportedly taken decisive action. Sources within the palace allege that he signed an unprecedented order to remove Archie from the royal line of succession entirely, severing the boy's claim to the throne and rewriting royal history in the process. The fallout, both inside and outside the palace, is said to be unlike anything the royals have faced in modern times. But how did it come to this? What drove a father, and now a king, to strip his own grandson of his birthright? Was this an act of justice in the name of the crown, or a ruthless display of power designed to bury the family's shame? To understand the gravity of this moment, we need to rewind the clock and revisit the series of events that led to this revelation. The story begins years ago, when the world was still caught up in the fairy tale romance of Harry and Meghan. It was 2018 when the fiery-haired prince, often called the Spare and Britain's most famous family, tied the knot with the American actress in a wedding watched by millions. The union was hailed as a fresh, modern chapter for the monarchy, a bridge between centuries-old tradition and the vibrant multiculturalism of the 21st century. Soon after, Meghan's pregnancy was announced. Royal watchers and tabloids alike went into a frenzy, eagerly anticipating the arrival of the first mixed-race child born into the Windsor dynasty. But behind the scenes, not everyone was celebrating. Insiders began murmuring about private tensions, about Harry's increasingly erratic behavior, and about a growing rift between him and his brother, Prince William. There were whispers of doubts too quiet, poisonous suggestions that Archie's arrival didn't quite fit the royal narrative. The rumors were dismissed by most as nothing more than the cruel gossip of a relentless press corps. After all, how could anyone question a child's parentage in such a public and revered family? And yet, in the gilded corridors of power, someone did. A senior royal aide, concerned about maintaining the sanctity of the bloodline, allegedly pushed for a discreet paternity test shortly after Archie's birth. According to the doctor who has now come forward, the results were clear. Harry's DNA did not match Archie's. The implications were staggering. If true, it would mean that Archie, seventh in line to the throne at birth, had no legitimate claim to the royal bloodline. But instead of confronting the issue publicly or privately, Meghan reportedly went into battle mode. The doctor claimed she threatened lawsuits, leveraged her connections in Hollywood and the media, and swore she would ruin anyone who dared leak the information. The test was buried deep in the palace archives, never to see the light of day. Until now. Years later, this doctor, racked with guilt and convinced the public deserved to know the truth, allegedly decided to blow the whistle. His confession, made to an investigative journalist and now circulating in both tabloids and reputable news outlets, has thrown the monarchy into turmoil. King Charles, caught between his duty to the crown and his love for his family, was forced to make a choice: protect the institution or protect his grandson. In the end, sources claim, Charles chose the crown. Reports say he convened his most trusted advisors, deliberated for days, and finally signed the order to erase Archie from the royal succession. For the first time in modern British history, a royal child has been formally cut out of the line, not because of scandalous behavior or abdication, but because of questions about his very bloodline. The emotional toll of this decision is said to be immense. Harry, already estranged from much of his family after his and Meghan's move to California, reportedly fell into despair upon learning of his son's removal. Meghan, meanwhile, is described by palace insiders as furious and ready to fight back with every weapon in her arsenal. The couple's supporters argue that this is nothing more than a smear campaign orchestrated by the royal establishment to punish Meghan for defying tradition. But others believe the doctor's claims are too detailed, too credible to dismiss. And so the questions swirl: is this the monarchy's ultimate betrayal? Or is it the crown's desperate act of self-preservation? Did Meghan knowingly deceive Harry and the world? Or is she the victim of an elaborate plot to destroy her family's reputation? As we peel back the layers of this astonishing story, prepare to hear from insiders, experts, and those closest to the drama. We'll take you behind the palace walls, into the hushed conversations and secret meetings that led to this moment. Because at the heart of it all lies one chilling truth: in the House of Windsor, blood is everything. And when that bloodline is threatened, nothing, not even the innocence of a child, is sacred. The British monarchy, for all its pomp and splendor, is built on one unshakable principle: blood. For over 1,000 years, kings and queens have ruled by virtue of their lineage, their right to the throne written into their very DNA. In this ancient institution, blood isn't just thicker than water, it's the lifeblood of power, wealth, and tradition. It's the invisible thread that ties sovereign to subject, past to present, and the crown to its people. But what happens when that thread is frayed, or worse, broken? What happens when doubts about a royal child's parentage threaten to unravel the very foundation of the monarchy? This is not just a question for historians or constitutional scholars. It's the terrifying reality the royal family now faces after the leak of a secret paternity test that could forever alter the line of succession. To understand the depth of the crisis, we must return to the days when Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was first introduced to the world. It was May 2019, and the atmosphere was electric. The newest member of the royal family, wrapped in a pristine white blanket and cradled in his father's arms, was presented to an eager press at St. George's Hall in Windsor Castle. Cameras clicked furiously as Harry and Meghan smiled, beaming with pride and love. Harry, visibly emotional, told reporters, "It's been the most amazing experience I could ever possibly imagine." To the world, it looked like a fairy tale. But in the corridors of Buckingham Palace, unease began to take root. Behind closed doors, there were murmurs, faint at first, then louder, about Archie's appearance and the circumstances surrounding his birth. Why was there so much secrecy about the hospital? Why had Meghan reportedly declined the traditional post-birth photo outside the Lindo wing, a rite of passage for royal mothers? These questions, though whispered, were potent. In a family where every detail is scrutinized and controlled, deviation from tradition often breeds suspicion. For some royal aides, these suspicions were more than idle gossip. One unnamed source, described by insiders as fiercely protective of the monarchy, allegedly raised concerns that could not be ignored. This senior aide feared that if there was even the slightest chance Archie wasn't Harry's biological son, it could spark a constitutional crisis unlike any Britain had seen in centuries. The line of succession, carefully preserved through war, scandal, and abdication, could not withstand a child who wasn't of Windsor blood. This wasn't the first time royal parentage had been questioned in Britain's long history. Centuries earlier, King Henry VIII had obsessed over producing a male heir, while rumors about illegitimate children swirled in royal circles. More recently, conspiracy theorists had spread baseless claims about Prince Harry's own paternity, suggesting he was the son of Major James Hewitt rather than Prince Charles, claims repeatedly and vehemently denied by both Hewitt and Harry's mother, Princess Diana. The royal family had endured those rumors and survived. But this was different. This time, the whispers weren't about an heir's father, but about the legitimacy of a new generation. And so, according to palace insiders, the decision was made to seek the truth. In strictest secrecy, a paternity test was commissioned. Only a handful of people knew about it: the senior aide who demanded it, the doctor tasked with performing it, and a few select members of the royal inner circle. The test, conducted on samples collected discreetly, was meant to settle doubts once and for all. No one outside the palace would ever know. But what they found was not the reassurance they sought. The results reportedly confirmed their worst fears. Harry was not Archie's biological father. At that moment, the weight of centuries pressed down on Buckingham Palace. This wasn't just a private family matter, it was a constitutional emergency. If Archie wasn't Harry's son, he had no legal right to the privileges, titles, or place in the line of succession he had been given at birth. The monarchy's very legitimacy was at stake. Inside the palace, reactions varied. Some advisors reportedly urged immediate action to protect the institution, arguing that the public must never learn the truth. Others advocated compassion, insisting that Archie was still Harry's son in every meaningful way and should be allowed to keep his status. But overriding all was the fear that if the truth leaked, as it inevitably has now, the monarchy would face unprecedented public outrage. For Meghan, this revelation posed an existential threat. According to reports, she fought back with ferocity, allegedly threatening legal action and leveraging her connections to quash the story before it could escape palace walls. One insider claimed Meghan made it clear that she would go nuclear if the test results were ever made public. She knew what was at stake, not just her son's place in the royal family, but her entire future as Duchess of Sussex. For Harry, the situation was equally fraught. Already a man torn between duty and love, he now faced the possibility that the child he believed to be his own flesh and blood wasn't. Did he know about the test? Did he suspect the truth? Or was he, like the rest of the world, completely blindsided? Meanwhile, King Charles found himself in an agonizing position. As both grandfather and monarch, he had to weigh his love for Archie against his sacred duty to protect the crown. History would judge him harshly, whatever he decided. The palace's initial response was to do nothing. Better to bury the secret deep within the archives, they thought, than risk a public scandal. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and this one proved no exception. Years later, the doctor who conducted the test, racked by guilt and convinced the truth must come out, decided to speak. His bombshell revelation, shared with a prominent journalist, detonated like a grenade in the heart of the monarchy. For the first time in living memory, the royal bloodline itself was under direct attack. The story sparked outrage, disbelief, and fierce debate. Some accused the palace of cold-hearted cruelty. Others called for Archie's immediate removal from the line of succession. In the end, Charles acted. According to palace sources, he signed a historic order stripping Archie of his place in the line and revoking any future claims to the throne. It was a decision that would alter royal history forever. But as Britain and the world reeled from the news, one question loomed larger than all the others. Was this truly about preserving the monarchy? Or was it a ruthless power play designed to destroy Meghan Markle once and for all? It began with whispers, faint, barely audible, like a cold breeze slipping through the cracks of Buckingham Palace's ancient walls. At first, they were dismissed as idle gossip, the sort of petty speculation that had always clung to the royal family. But soon, those whispers turned into murmurs, and the murmurs into conversations behind tightly closed doors. For a family obsessed with maintaining its image, even the suggestion of scandal was enough to send shockwaves through the entire institution. The questions came slowly at first. Quiet comments about Archie's features. Observations about timelines. Aides wondering, in hushed voices, why Harry had grown so tense and withdrawn in the final months of Meghan's pregnancy. There were rumors, dangerous ones, that Archie didn't quite resemble his father. Look at the nose, the eyes, the hair, one anonymous courtier was said to have murmured. Isn't it strange? To the world, such musings would seem cruel and intrusive. But to the royal household, where every detail of appearance, behavior, and history is scrutinized with almost forensic precision, they were sparks that could ignite an inferno. For centuries, the monarchy had relied on one sacred constant, the purity of its bloodline. The idea that a child born into the House of Windsor might not truly be of Windsor blood was more than an embarrassment. It was an existential threat. And so, according to palace insiders, the whispers began to circle higher and higher in the hierarchy until they reached the ears of a senior royal aide, a man described as fiercely loyal to the crown, a traditionalist to his core. For him, this was not about personal animosity toward Meghan Markle, though he was rumored to have reservations about her from the start. No, this was about protecting an institution that had survived wars, abdications, and scandals. This was about ensuring the continuity of the monarchy at all costs. It was this aide, sources claim, who first raised the unthinkable possibility in a confidential meeting with a handful of trusted colleagues. If there's any doubt, he reportedly said, we have a duty to know the truth. But this was no ordinary family matter. The stakes were far higher. A whisper about paternity could spiral into a constitutional crisis if it reached the public. The aide was cautious, moving quietly to gather information. He consulted legal advisors about the implications and spoke to palace medical staff about what might be done discreetly. He even broached the subject, carefully and indirectly, with King Charles himself. Charles, as one insider recalls, was visibly shaken. He loved Archie, the tiny boy who had brought so much joy to his youngest son's life. But he was also painfully aware of his responsibilities as monarch in waiting. Should the crown come before family? That question would haunt him for months to come. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan seemed oblivious to the storm brewing around them. They had retreated into Frogmore Cottage, shielded from the public eye and determined to carve out a private life for their growing family. Harry, already wary of the press after a lifetime of intrusion, had become fiercely protective of Meghan and Archie. Meghan, for her part, appeared eager to establish her place in the royal hierarchy, pushing for modern reforms and seeking a larger role in public engagements. But behind her confident smile, she may have sensed that something wasn't right. It was during this period, palace sources allege, that Meghan became aware of the whispers. Reports claim that she confronted a staff member in tears after hearing rumors about Archie's paternity circulating among household staff. "How dare they question my child?" she reportedly cried. "This is harassment, and I won't stand for it." Determined to silence the speculation, Meghan went on the offensive. She and Harry began clamping down on leaks, firing aides they suspected of gossiping and issuing stern warnings to remaining staff. The couple's relationship with the press, already fraught, deteriorated further as they launched lawsuits against tabloids they accused of spreading falsehoods. But no matter how hard they tried, the whispers refused to die. The aide, undeterred by Meghan's protests, pressed ahead. Behind the scenes, he worked with a trusted royal physician to arrange for a secret paternity test. The plan was executed with military precision. Samples were collected discreetly during routine medical checks, ensuring that neither Harry nor Meghan would suspect a thing. The results, when they arrived, were devastating. The aide reportedly stared at the report in silence, feeling both vindicated and horrified. The DNA markers didn't align. Prince Harry was not the biological father of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor. What to do now? The news was shared with only the tightest circle of confidants. Their reactions varied. Some were appalled at the invasion of privacy, arguing that Archie's paternity was a private matter between Harry and Meghan. Others insisted the monarchy could not afford to ignore such a revelation. One advisor allegedly warned, if this ever gets out, it will make Edward VIII's abdication look like a minor scandal. Meghan, however, was far from passive in the face of these developments. When word of the test's existence reached her ears, though it's unclear exactly how, she reacted with fury. She allegedly confronted senior staff in a heated exchange, demanding to know who had authorized such a violation. "This is treason," she is reported to have shouted. "I will destroy anyone who spreads this lie." She quickly mobilized her legal team, sending warning letters to any media outlet that so much as hinted at paternity rumors. She also tightened her inner circle, ensuring that only her most loyal allies had access to sensitive information about Archie. Meghan's defenders argue that her actions were those of a mother protecting her child from cruel and baseless attacks. Her critics, however, saw them as the desperate maneuvers of someone with something to hide. As tensions escalated, Harry was caught in the middle. Some say he refused to believe the rumors and remained steadfastly devoted to Meghan and Archie. Others claim he was plagued by doubt, haunted by questions he dared not voice aloud. Did he ever see the test results himself? Or was he shielded from the truth by Meghan and palace officials? What is clear is that the palace decided, at least for the moment, to bury the results. They were sealed in a confidential file and locked away in a secure archive. Only a handful of people knew the truth, and they were sworn to silence. But in the world of royalty, no secret stays buried forever. This is where the Whisper campaign, once confined to the marble halls of Buckingham Palace, began to seep into the public domain. A journalist with close ties to palace staff caught wind of the story. Bloggers and royal watchers started posting cryptic messages online. Tabloid headlines grew bolder, hinting at unspoken tensions and family secrets threatening the monarchy. And then came the doctor's confession, a revelation that blew the whispers wide open and set the stage for a scandal that would engulf not just Meghan and Harry, but the entire royal family. The decision to speak out did not come easily to him. For years, the doctor had carried a burden that seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. As the palace's trusted physician, he had been privy to countless secrets, pregnancies, illnesses, even moments of private vulnerability from the most guarded family in Britain. He had taken an oath, not just as a medical professional but as a servant of the crown, to protect those secrets with his life. But this was different. This wasn't an ordinary family matter. This was a secret so vast, so explosive, that suppressing it felt like complicity in a lie that could alter history itself. It all began when he was summoned to a discreet meeting at Buckingham Palace late one winter evening, shortly after Archie's birth. The request came not from Meghan or Harry, but from a senior royal aide, a man whose loyalty to the monarchy was legendary and whose cold pragmatism had earned him as many enemies as admirers. The doctor had been told in no uncertain terms that this was a matter of national importance. "I need you to conduct a paternity test," the aide had said, his voice low but urgent. "This is not to leave this room. The future of the monarchy depends on it." The physician had been stunned. Never in his decades-long career had he been asked to perform such a test, let alone in circumstances so delicate and fraught with political consequence. His instinct was to refuse. He was a healer, not a pawn in palace power games. But the aide's argument was relentless. "If there's even the slightest chance that Archie is not of Windsor blood," he insisted, "the entire succession is at risk. Would you have us crown a pretender someday?" Reluctantly, the doctor agreed. The samples were collected discreetly during a routine examination. Neither Meghan nor Harry suspected anything, believing the visit to be part of standard postnatal care. The physician worked quickly, sending the samples to a private lab under a false name to avoid arousing suspicion. He told himself it was just a formality, a way to silence unfounded rumors. But when the results came back, the numbers told a story he could not ignore. The markers didn't align. The DNA sequences were clear and irrefutable. Prince Harry was not the biological father of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor. He remembered staring at the report in shock, his pulse pounding in his ears. He had expected relief, a confirmation that the child was indeed Harry's and that the whispers would be silenced. Instead, he held in his hands the spark for a fire that could burn down the entire House of Windsor. When he delivered the results to the aide, the reaction was eerily calm. The man took the papers, scanned them silently, and folded them into an envelope. "This never happened," he said. "You never saw these results. Do you understand?" The doctor nodded. But inside, he felt a deep unease take root. At first, he tried to convince himself that silence was the right choice. After all, who was he to interfere in the affairs of a family so powerful, so steeped in tradition? But as the years passed and he watched the royal family present Archie to the world as a legitimate heir, his conscience began to gnaw at him. He saw Harry and Meghan's Netflix specials, their interviews about oppression and racism, and their insistence that their family had been unfairly targeted. Meanwhile, the secret he carried felt like a time bomb. And then there were the personal consequences. The doctor, once regarded as a pillar of discretion, found himself increasingly isolated within royal circles. He noticed subtle changes in how people treated him. The clipped conversations, the sudden end to invitations, the cold stares. It was as if the palace feared that at any moment he might speak. His breaking point came after learning of King Charles's decision to remove Archie from the line of succession. That single act, he believed, confirmed his worst fears. The monarchy was moving to erase the boy's claim before the truth came out. But rather than dealing with the issue openly, they were, in his view, compounding the deception. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," he later told an investigative journalist during a clandestine meeting in a London cafe. "This isn't just a family secret. It's a matter of public interest. The people have a right to know who is in the line of succession." The journalist, a seasoned reporter known for exposing government corruption, was skeptical at first. After all, palace staff had leaked sensational stories before, many of them later proven false. But the doctor came armed with proof. He handed over a copy of the original lab report, along with a sworn affidavit detailing the circumstances of the test. The journalist, realizing the magnitude of what he was holding, felt a chill run down his spine. When the story broke, it was like lighting a fuse. Headlines screamed across front pages, "DNA bombshell rocks the royals." "Doctor claims Harry is not Archie's father." The public was stunned. Some refused to believe it, dismissing it as a smear campaign against Meghan. Others demanded answers from the palace. Social media erupted with theories, accusations, and fierce debates. In the midst of the firestorm, The doctor spoke publicly for the first time. Appearing in a blurred-out interview to protect his identity, he said, "I didn't come forward to hurt anyone. But the monarchy has a duty to be honest with the people it serves. This was never about attacking Meghan or Harry. It's about transparency and truth." His words only deepened the crisis. Meghan's lawyers issued furious statements denying the claims and vowing to sue for defamation. "This is an outrageous violation of privacy," one spokesperson said. "These falsehoods are designed to destroy a family." Harry, meanwhile, was reported to be devastated and struggling to process the betrayal. For the doctor, there was no turning back. He had risked his career, his reputation, and possibly his safety to bring this secret to light. But whether history would remember him as a whistleblower or a traitor remained to be seen. And as the dust began to settle, Buckingham Palace faced a choice it had long hoped to avoid: acknowledge the scandal and confront the fallout, or double down on silence and hope the storm would pass. Either way, the monarchy would never be the same again. The news of the DNA leak spread like wildfire, and Meghan Markle found herself standing in the eye of a storm she thought she had silenced long ago. To her, the betrayal wasn't just about the doctor who had broken his vow of confidentiality or the royal aides who had commissioned a test behind her back. It was about the narrative she and Harry had fought so hard to build, the story of a loving young family unjustly hounded by the institution they had fled. And now, in an instant, that narrative was cracking under the weight of a single, devastating revelation. For Meghan, the stakes couldn't have been higher. If Archie was exposed as not being Harry's biological child, it wouldn't simply mean public humiliation or the loss of royal titles for her son. It would destroy any future they might have built as a family within or outside the monarchy. It would cast doubt on her entire relationship with Harry and provide fresh ammunition to her most vicious critics. And so, according to palace insiders and journalists close to the Sussexes, Meghan allegedly went into overdrive. In the earliest days, when whispers about Archie's paternity were just beginning to circulate inside Buckingham Palace, Meghan's instinct had been to crush them at the source. Reports from former staffers describe her as resolute, focused, and unflinching as she moved to identify the leakers and shut them down. She demanded loyalty pledges from key members of her inner circle and threatened to sue any employee caught spreading malicious gossip about her family. Some palace aides viewed her efforts as excessive, even paranoid. One insider described how Meghan allegedly summoned senior staff to a tense meeting at Frogmore Cottage shortly after Archie's birth. "She was furious," the aide recalled. "She told us, 'I know what you're all whispering. You think you can destroy my son's future with your lies. I will not allow it.'" Her voice was shaking, but her eyes were like steel. It wasn't just staff who felt her wrath. Meghan reportedly leaned on her Hollywood connections to help her suppress media coverage. According to investigative journalists, she called in favors from powerful friends in Los Angeles and New York, urging them to pressure editors and producers to steer clear of any stories about Archie's paternity. One source claimed Meghan told an American media mogul, "This is my family. If the British press won't leave us alone, then you need to make sure your people do." But even as she fought to control the narrative externally, Meghan allegedly began waging a quieter, more calculated battle inside the palace walls. Former courtiers say she worked tirelessly to build alliances with sympathetic royals and staffers who could protect her position. She spent hours in private conversations with senior advisors, presenting herself as a victim of racial prejudice and institutional hostility. She framed it as an attack on her child because of who she was. An outsider, an American, a woman of color, one ex-employee recalled. It was a smart strategy because it made any criticism of her seem like bigotry. Yet not everyone was convinced. A small but influential faction within the palace remained deeply suspicious of Meghan and increasingly vocal about what they saw as her attempts to manipulate the family's public image. These tensions reportedly boiled over in a private confrontation between Meghan and a high-ranking courtier, who accused her of using the press and public sympathy to cover for secrets that would destroy the monarchy. Meghan's response, as described by witnesses, was explosive. "How dare you question my integrity? How dare you question my sons?" she allegedly shouted. "You think you're protecting the crown, but you're trying to ruin my family. I won't let you do it. I will take this whole institution down before I let you take Archie from me." Her alleged determination to protect Archie extended beyond angry words. When Meghan learned of the secret paternity test, she reportedly took immediate legal action. Lawyers acting on her behalf sent cease and desist letters to several newspapers and online platforms that hinted at unverified rumors about a member of the royal family. These letters warned of swift and severe legal consequences for anyone publishing defamatory falsehoods. Her legal team didn't stop there. They allegedly demanded access to the original DNA test results, insisting they had been obtained without Meghan's consent and violated her family's right to privacy. However, palace officials refused to hand over the documents, citing security concerns and the sensitive nature of the information. Faced with this impasse, Meghan is said to have turned to Harry, urging him to confront his father and demand the destruction of any evidence related to the test. According to a palace source, Harry reluctantly agreed and arranged a private meeting with then Prince Charles. What was said in that meeting remains unknown, but insiders suggest Charles stood firm, telling Harry, "This is bigger than you or me. The truth must never come out, for all our sakes." The confrontation reportedly left Harry distraught. Torn between his loyalty to Meghan and his duty to his family, he began withdrawing further from royal life. Meghan, sensing his anguish, is said to have doubled down on her efforts to keep their family intact. She became obsessed with control, a former advisor claimed. Every photograph, every interview, every word was part of her strategy to maintain the image of the perfect royal family. But behind closed doors, she was fighting a war she knew she might not win. When the doctor's confession finally broke in the press, Meghan's alleged worst fears were realized. Despite her years of effort, the truth had escaped her grasp. In public, she responded with righteous fury, releasing a statement condemning the leak as a cruel and calculated violation of our family's privacy. She also reportedly instructed her legal team to prepare defamation suits against the doctor, the journalist who published the story, and any media outlets repeating the claims. Privately, however, Meghan's mood was said to be darker. She allegedly told a confidant, "They've been trying to destroy me from the start. They don't care who they hurt me, Harry, even Archie. But I swear I will make them regret this." For her supporters, Meghan's actions were those of a mother protecting her child from an institution that had always resented her. For her detractors, they were proof of a calculated cover-up, an attempt to manipulate the monarchy for her own ends. As the scandal deepened, the question remained. Was Meghan fighting to save her family from unjust persecution, or was she hiding a truth so devastating it could bring down the House of Windsor itself? And while Meghan's defenders and critics waged their battles in the press and on social media, inside the palace, King Charles was preparing to make the most consequential decision of his reign. For King Charles, the weight of the crown had never felt heavier. Long before he ascended the throne, he had endured decades of scandal, heartbreak, and public scrutiny. Yet nothing in his turbulent life had prepared him for the choice now before him: to leave Archie Harrison in the royal line of succession and risk the monarchy's collapse if the rumors were true, or to sever his grandson's future with a single stroke of the pen. The news of the DNA leak had hit Charles like a physical blow. He had always prided himself on being a man of balance, someone who could weigh the needs of family against the duties of kingship. But now those two forces had collided in a way that seemed impossible to reconcile. In public, Charles was calm and measured, continuing with royal engagements and greeting crowds as though nothing were amiss. Behind closed doors, however, palace staff described a man tortured by indecision and haunted by the shadows of history. One aide, speaking on condition of anonymity, recalled seeing Charles pacing the floor of his private study at Clarence House late into the night. His hands were clasped tightly behind his back, his head bowed in thought. On the polished mahogany desk before him lay two folders, one containing legal documents that would formally remove Archie from the line of succession, and the other filled with letters from advisors warning of the potential constitutional crisis if the matter were left unresolved. To Charles, both paths seemed catastrophic. If he acted to strip Archie of his place, he risked being seen as a cold and ruthless king willing to sacrifice his own flesh and blood for the sake of the institution. But if he did nothing, he feared the monarchy would be accused of deceit and weakness, unable to enforce the very traditions it claimed to uphold. Making the situation even more agonizing was his relationship with Harry. Though strained since the Sussexes' departure for California, Charles still loved his youngest son deeply. Harry, for all his anger and accusations, was the boy Charles had cradled after Diana's death, the son he had walked behind in that heartbreaking funeral procession. The thought of inflicting further pain on him, of cutting Harry's child out of the family legacy, was almost unbearable. But there were voices in Charles's ear urging him to act. Prince William, ever the pragmatist, reportedly argued that decisive action was necessary to protect the monarchy. "We can't afford uncertainty," William allegedly told his father during a heated discussion at Sandringham. "The public has to know the line of succession is secure. If we don't act now, this will haunt us for generations." William's wife, Catherine, was said to have shared her husband's concerns but urged Charles to consider the emotional fallout as well. "Think about Harry," she reportedly said softly during a private conversation. "He's hurting. Whatever decision you make, you can't lose him completely." Senior courtiers, meanwhile, were almost unanimous in their advice. Archie had to go. One advisor, a veteran of royal crises stretching back decades, warned Charles bluntly, "If you hesitate, Your Majesty, the monarchy could fall. The people will not forgive a royal family that cannot even safeguard its own bloodline." Even the Archbishop of Canterbury, whom Charles consulted in a rare private audience, was reportedly conflicted. "You must protect the crown," he told the king. "But remember that the crown exists for the people, and the people value compassion as much as tradition." Caught between these opposing forces, Charles began drafting letters in his own hand, each a potential path forward. One letter, addressed to Harry, expressed sorrow and regret for what the king felt compelled to do. Another, never sent, offered a compromise. Archie would retain his place in the line of succession but would not be granted titles or privileges until he came of age, and the matter could be addressed directly. But Charles knew there could be no middle ground. The monarchy was built on certainty, and uncertainty was its greatest enemy. As the days turned to weeks, the media frenzy intensified. Tabloids splashed lurid headlines about Archie's secret, while opinion polls showed a sharply divided public. Some demanded Charles remove Archie immediately to preserve the integrity of the monarchy. Others accused the palace of orchestrating a cruel campaign against Meghan and Harry, insisting the family should stand by them no matter what. For Charles, the turning point came during a late-night phone call with an old friend, a fellow aristocrat who had watched the royal family weather many storms. "You're not just a father anymore, Charles," the friend reportedly said. "You're a king, and a king must sometimes make choices that break his heart." The next morning, Charles called a meeting with his most senior advisors. They gathered in the green drawing room at Buckingham Palace, the air thick with tension. Charles listened as they laid out the risks, the consequences, the historical precedents. Finally, he spoke. "I have thought long and hard about this," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "And I see no other way. The integrity of the crown must come first, even before my own family. Let it be done." With those words, the decision was made. A formal document was drawn up and signed later that day. It stripped Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor of any claim to royal titles and removed his name from the official line of succession. Only a handful of people witnessed the signing, but those who did said Charles's hand trembled slightly as he wrote his name. "God forgive me," he murmured as he set down the pen. The act was swift, decisive, and devastating. For Charles, it was not a triumph, but a tragedy, the price of kingship in its purest form. But as the ink dried on the order, one question hung in the air like a ghost. Had Charles saved the monarchy from ruin, or had he just sown the seeds of its ultimate destruction? The signing of the order to remove Archie Harrison from the royal line of succession was not the end of the conflict. It was only the beginning of a new and even more treacherous battle within the House of Windsor. As news of King Charles's decision trickled through the palace's gilded halls, a quiet war erupted among those closest to the throne. Loyalties were tested, alliances forged and broken, and the royal family found itself teetering on the brink of total implosion. For centuries, the British monarchy had been defined not only by its outward show of unity, but also by its ability to manage internal discord behind closed doors. But this scandal was different. It cut to the heart of everything the institution stood for: bloodline, legitimacy, and the unbroken chain of succession stretching back over 1,000 years. And now, the question of Archie's paternity had fractured the palace into warring factions. On one side were the traditionalists, courtiers, advisors, and even some family members who believed King Charles had no choice but to act swiftly and decisively. To them, the monarchy was not a sentimental family business but an enduring symbol of British identity, and its survival required ruthless pragmatism. If that meant severing ties with a child whose parentage was in question, so be it. The crown must endure, one senior advisor reportedly declared during a tense meeting. Even if hearts must break, the institution must stand. Leading this faction was Prince William. Known for his sense of duty and calm pragmatism, William had become increasingly vocal in his support for removing Archie from the line. According to insiders, William had been among the first to confront his father about the need for action. "We can't allow uncertainty to linger," he allegedly told Charles during a private meeting at Kensington Palace. "This isn't just about Harry and Meghan anymore. It's about the future of the monarchy itself." William's reasoning was clear. If the rumors were true and Archie remained in the line of succession, it could spark a constitutional crisis that would engulf Britain and damage the family's legacy beyond repair. Some aides even reported that William saw the situation as eerily similar to the abdication crisis of 1936, when Edward VIII gave up the throne for love and nearly destroyed the monarchy in the process. William, determined to avoid such a disaster, pushed his father to take decisive action before it was too late. Yet not everyone agreed. On the other side of the divide stood the moderates, those who argued that bloodline or not, Archie was Harry's son in every meaningful way and deserved protection from the ruthless machinery of the monarchy. This faction reportedly included Queen Camilla, who was said to have urged her husband to consider the human cost of his decision. "Think of Harry," she reportedly told Charles in a private moment. "He's already lost so much. If you do this, he may never forgive you." There were others, too, who worried that stripping Archie of his place would backfire spectacularly in the court of public opinion. In an age of social media and instant outrage, the palace could no longer count on deference and blind loyalty from the British people. "This isn't the 1950s, one younger aide warned during a strategy meeting. "If we appear cold and calculating, we'll be torn apart online. Meghan's supporters will paint her as a victim all over again." This divide extended even to the palace staff. Longtime courtiers, steeped in the traditions of the monarchy, whispered that Meghan had played Harry for a fool and that Charles had no choice but to act. Younger staffers, many of whom had been brought in during the Sussexes' brief tenure as working royals, expressed quiet sympathy for Harry and Meghan. Some even hinted that the family's actions risked alienating a new generation of Britons who already viewed the monarchy as outdated and cruel. As tensions mounted, the atmosphere within Buckingham Palace grew toxic. There were hushed conversations in corridors, heated arguments in private chambers, and icy silences at family gatherings. One staffer described the mood as a cold civil war. Amid the chaos, Harry and Meghan remained in California, unaware of the full extent of the palace power struggle. According to sources close to the Sussexes, Harry was growing increasingly suspicious that his family was plotting against him. Meghan, meanwhile, was said to be furious beyond words upon learning of Charles's deliberations. "They're trying to erase my son," she reportedly told a friend in Los Angeles. "I won't let them." The couple's reaction only fueled the divisions back in London. William, already exasperated with his brother's repeated public criticisms of the family, allegedly accused Meghan of manipulating Harry and using Archie as a pawn. Meghan's defenders countered that William was jealous of Harry's independence and sought to punish Meghan for refusing to conform to palace expectations. Caught in the middle was King Charles. As the factions around him grew louder, he found himself increasingly isolated. Even his closest confidants disagreed about the path forward, leaving Charles to wrestle with the decision alone. In private, he reportedly confided to an old friend, "No matter what I do, I'll be the villain to someone." And yet, as the arguments raged and the stakes grew higher, one truth became impossible to ignore. There could be no resolution that spared everyone's feelings. The monarchy demanded sacrifice, and this time, it seemed that sacrifice would come at the expense of a child's future. By the time Charles finally made his decision, the battle lines had been drawn so sharply that reconciliation seemed all but impossible. Those who supported the king's action praised him as a leader willing to make the hard choices for the good of the crown. Those who opposed him whispered that he had sacrificed his grandson to save an institution that was already crumbling under the weight of its own secrets. And as the dust began to settle within the palace walls, an even more dangerous storm was brewing outside. The world was about to learn the truth, and no amount of palace maneuvering could prepare the royals for what came next. Royal DNA bombshell, Archie's place in the line of succession in jeopardy. Within minutes, that headline had spread across every major British newspaper, from the most reputable broadsheets to the salacious tabloids. Within an hour, it was trending worldwide on social media, igniting a firestorm of speculation, outrage, and disbelief. The carefully constructed walls of royal secrecy, designed to shield the Windsors from scandal, had crumbled in the space of a single news cycle. For years, the monarchy had weathered controversy with a formula of stoic silence and dignified restraint. But this was no ordinary scandal. This was not about petty family feuds or tabloid gossip. This was about the legitimacy of a child born into the most famous family on earth, and whether that child truly carried the bloodline of kings. The story had been broken by an investigative journalist known for exposing political corruption, not royal scandals. That alone lended a weight that even seasoned palace aides found unsettling. In her report, the journalist revealed that a highly confidential paternity test conducted shortly after Archie's birth had determined that Prince Harry was not the boy's biological father. The journalist claimed her source was none other than the royal family's own doctor, a man who had risked his career and reputation to bring the truth to light. The effect was instantaneous. Across the UK, television anchors spoke in hushed, somber tones as they announced the news. Tonight, Buckingham Palace faces perhaps its gravest crisis since the abdication of Edward VIII, one commentator intoned. In homes, pubs, and workplaces, Britons debated the revelations with a mixture of fascination and horror. Some refused to believe it. It's a smear campaign against Meghan, one woman said angrily on a live call-in show. They've been trying to drive her out from the beginning. Others were less forgiving. If the boy isn't Harry's, he has no place in the line of succession, another caller insisted. The monarchy is about bloodlines. It always has been. Across the Atlantic, the American media pounced on the story with characteristic zeal. Talk show hosts speculated breathlessly about what the revelations meant for Meghan and Harry's marriage. Paparazzi swarmed the gates of the couple's Montecito mansion, hoping for a glimpse of Harry or Meghan, or even Archie himself. Within hours, the Sussexes were forced to issue a statement through their lawyers. These claims are categorically false and represent a dangerous invasion of our family's privacy. We will pursue all available legal remedies against those who perpetuate these lies. But the damage had already been done. As the hours turned to days, the scandal metastasized. Online, social media became a battlefield. Supporters of Meghan and Harry, calling themselves the #Sussex Squad, rallied around the couple, accusing the royal family of orchestrating a smear campaign to distract from their own failings. They couldn't handle a strong black woman in the monarchy, so now they're going after her child, one viral tweet declared, garnering over 500,000 likes. Meanwhile, royalists and critics of the Sussexes accused Meghan of deception on an unprecedented scale. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some suggested Meghan had deliberately conceived Archie with another man to secure her position in the royal family. Others believed Harry had known the truth all along but had chosen to stand by Meghan for the sake of appearances. At the center of the storm was Buckingham Palace, struggling to contain a narrative that was spiraling out of control. In the first 24 hours after the story broke, the palace maintained its usual strategy of never complain, never explain. But by the second day, it became clear that silence was no longer an option. In an extraordinary move, King Charles authorized a rare televised address to the nation. Seated behind an ornate desk in the blue drawing room, with the Union Jack and a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II behind him, Charles looked every bit the somber monarch. "This has been a deeply painful time for our family," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "I wish to emphasize that the well-being and privacy of all my grandchildren are of paramount importance to me. However, as king, I also have a duty to preserve the integrity of the monarchy and the trust of the people we serve." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Recent events have led to much speculation and, indeed, anguish. I ask the nation for understanding as we address this matter privately within the family. The monarchy has endured for centuries because of its ability to adapt and to uphold the values that bind us all together." The speech did little to calm the storm. Some praised Charles for his measured tone and refusal to confirm or deny the DNA allegations. Others condemned him for what they saw as cold detachment and an unwillingness to defend his own grandson. Behind palace walls, the atmosphere was one of controlled panic. Senior courtiers held round-the-clock strategy sessions to manage the fallout. One aide described the mood as a perfect blend of chaos and fear. Another admitted, "We've never dealt with anything like this before. Not even Diana's death shook the institution this badly." Prince William, too, was reportedly shaken by the public reaction. Though he had supported Charles's decision to remove Archie from the line of succession, he now found himself the target of online abuse from Meghan's supporters. "William is heartless," read one trending hashtag. "He's punishing a child for the sins of the mother." For Harry and Meghan, life in California became a gilded cage. Paparazzi helicopters circled overhead. Neighbors were besieged by reporters offering cash for any scrap of information. According to sources close to the couple, Harry sank into a deep depression, plagued by feelings of betrayal and helplessness. Meghan, meanwhile, was described as furious and determined, allegedly vowing to expose the royal family's decades of secrets and lies if they didn't retract the claims. Yet even as the Sussexes prepared for war, questions lingered. Why had the doctor waited years to come forward? Why hadn't the palace acted sooner to quash the rumors? And perhaps most haunting of all, if Archie wasn't Harry's biological son, who was the father? The media, sensing blood in the water, pursued that last question with particular ferocity. Tabloids ran speculative stories about Meghan's former colleagues and acquaintances, dredging up old photographs and anonymous quotes. "Did Meghan have a secret before Harry?" screamed one headline. As the world watched in fascination and horror, one thing became clear: this was no longer just a family crisis or even a royal scandal. This was a global spectacle, a battle for truth, power, and the soul of an ancient institution. And in the heart of it all stood a child, oblivious to the storm raging around him, whose future had become the most contested question in Britain. For Prince Harry, the news of the DNA leak struck like a lightning bolt to the heart. He had always been protective of his family, fiercely so, and in Meghan and Archie, he thought he had finally found the safe haven he had spent his life searching for. But now, as the world questioned his son's very existence within the royal bloodline, Harry's carefully built sanctuary began to crumble around him. Those closest to Harry said he retreated almost completely into himself in the days following the revelation. Friends in Montecito described a man gripped by rage, sorrow, and confusion, pacing through the sprawling mansion he shared with Meghan and struggling to process the enormity of what was happening. "Harry was devastated," said one source familiar with the Sussexes' inner circle. This wasn't just about the media or even the monarchy anymore. It was about his son, his marriage, and his own sense of identity. He felt as though the ground had fallen out from under him. At first, Harry reportedly refused to believe the rumors. He insisted to Meghan, to his friends, and even to himself that Archie was his child and that the palace was engaged in a calculated smear campaign to punish them for walking away. "This is just like what they did to my mother," Harry is said to have told a close friend during a late-night phone call. "They're using lies and innuendo to destroy us, and this time they've gone after my boy." But privately, there were signs that doubt had begun to creep in. Harry, who had never fully recovered from the loss of his mother, was said to be haunted by the idea that history might be repeating itself, this time with him in the center of the storm. He wanted to believe Meghan completely, the friend said. But the pressure, the whispers, the headlines, it was too much. He started asking questions he never thought he'd have to ask. Inside the Montecito home, the atmosphere became tense and volatile. Meghan, who had always been the more pragmatic of the two, reportedly urged Harry to focus on fighting back. "They want to break you," she allegedly told him. "Don't let them. We need to take control of this narrative before they destroy everything." But Harry wasn't ready for strategy. He wasn't thinking like a prince or a public figure. He was thinking like a man in agony, a father whose love for his child had been thrown into question by forces beyond his control. One source recalled an especially emotional evening when Harry locked himself in his study for hours. When Meghan finally coaxed him out, she found him slumped in a chair, his face in his hands. "I don't know what's real anymore," he reportedly whispered. "What if they're right? What if Archie isn't mine?" Those words, overheard by a staffer, marked what many now consider Harry's breaking point. His pain wasn't confined to private moments. In public appearances, Harry seemed fragile and uncharacteristically subdued. During a virtual event for a mental health charity, viewers noticed his glassy eyes and faltering speech. "He looked like a man on the edge," one attendee later commented. Friends in California became increasingly concerned. We tried to get him to take a break, maybe even see a therapist, said a longtime confidant. But he kept saying, I can't stop now. They'll win if I stop. As the pressure mounted, Harry's relationship with Meghan began to show cracks. Though she remained publicly supportive, insiders claimed the couple argued bitterly behind closed doors. Harry's growing paranoia, his fear that perhaps the palace wasn't lying, that maybe Meghan had kept something from him, caused explosive rows. He wanted to believe her, but there were moments when he'd snap and demand the truth, said one source. It was heartbreaking to watch. Meanwhile, Harry was bombarded with messages from family members back in Britain. Prince William reportedly reached out in an effort to calm the storm, but their conversation devolved into a shouting match. You've always hated her, Harry allegedly accused his brother. You wanted this to happen. You wanted her destroyed. William, in turn, reportedly told Harry, this isn't about Meghan. This is about the monarchy. You need to open your eyes, Harry, before it's too late. Harry's relationship with King Charles fared no better. When Charles's office sent an official notice informing Harry of Archie's removal from the line of succession, Harry was said to have erupted in fury. You've disowned my son, he reportedly screamed during a phone call to the palace. He's your grandson, and you've treated him like dirt. In response, Charles reportedly maintained his composure, telling Harry, this was never about Archie as a boy. It's about protecting the crown. Someday you'll understand. But Harry wasn't ready to understand. In the weeks that followed, Harry's mental health appeared to deteriorate. Friends worried that he was spiraling into depression. He stopped returning phone calls, withdrew from public life, and spent hours alone in the garden, staring blankly into the distance. He was a shadow of himself, said one family friend. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. At one point, Harry reportedly considered taking a private flight back to London to confront his father and brother in person. But Meghan, fearing a media circus and more emotional trauma, persuaded him to stay in California. They've already made up their minds about you, she allegedly told him. Going back won't change anything. It'll only give them more ammunition. As Harry struggled to hold himself together, questions about Archie's paternity continued to swirl. Every day brought new headlines, new theories, new attacks. And though Meghan continued to deny the rumors vehemently, Harry's faith in his wife, and in his own sense of reality, was beginning to fray. The boy he loved so fiercely had become the center of a global controversy, and Harry felt powerless to protect him. For a man who had spent his whole life trying to shield those he loved from harm, this was the ultimate torment. In one moment of raw candor, Harry reportedly told a friend, if I lose Archie, if I lose Meghan, I don't know who I'll be anymore. They're all I have left. But even as Harry's world unraveled, forces far larger than him were moving into place. Back in London, the palace was preparing for its next move, a calculated strategy designed to preserve the monarchy at any cost. And in California, Meghan was quietly laying plans of her own. The battle for Archie's future, and for Harry's very soul, was far from over. Meghan Markle had been silent long enough. From the moment the first headlines appeared, she had watched with a growing sense of rage as her family was dragged through the mud. To her, the situation was not just an attack on her son's legitimacy or her husband's mental stability. It was a coordinated campaign by the British establishment to erase her family from history. And if they thought she would sit quietly and let them destroy her child's future, they were gravely mistaken. Insiders say Meghan's reaction to the DNA leak was a mix of fury and icy determination. At first, she reportedly tried to shield Harry from the full impact of the revelations, insisting they were nothing but malicious lies spread by the palace. They're doing this because they're afraid of us, she allegedly told him one night as he sat slumped in their Montecito living room, scrolling through endless news alerts. They can't stand that we're thriving without them. So they're going after Archie. But Meghan knew words alone would not be enough to stop the firestorm. She needed a plan, a counterattack so powerful that it would make Buckingham Palace think twice about coming for her family again. Her first move was legal. Within hours of the story breaking, Meghan's lawyers in Los Angeles and London were drafted to issue a series of cease and desist letters to media outlets that had published the doctor's claims. The letters demanded immediate retractions and threatened multi-million-dollar lawsuits for defamation and invasion of privacy. These baseless allegations are deeply harmful, not only to our clients but to an innocent child, one of Meghan's attorneys said in a rare public statement. We will not hesitate to pursue all available legal remedies. Several smaller tabloids quickly backed down, pulling their stories and issuing apologies. But the larger, more aggressive newspapers stood their ground, citing the public's right to know about issues that could affect the line of succession. Meghan's legal team responded by filing preliminary motions in both British and American courts. She came out swinging, said a California-based lawyer familiar with the case. This wasn't about negotiation. Meghan wanted blood. She was prepared to sue anyone and everyone who dared touch the story. At the same time, Meghan launched a behind-the-scenes media offensive. Drawing on her extensive Hollywood connections, she began reaching out to sympathetic journalists, influencers, and celebrities to rally support. Within days, high-profile figures like Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, and Serena Williams were posting messages of solidarity on social media, condemning what they called a vicious smear campaign against Meghan and Harry. This isn't just about Meghan and Harry, one of her allies tweeted. This is about protecting a child from hate and lies. The world should be better than this. The hashtag #WeStandWithMeghan began trending globally, sparking a digital war between her supporters and critics. Videos of Meghan's past speeches about motherhood and resilience were circulated widely, reframing her as a courageous mother fighting to protect her family from an archaic and vindictive institution. But Meghan's strategy didn't stop at legal threats and social media campaigns.